So my name is Melissa Kane. I'm a host of a podcast, like everyone is, called Get Out the Bet. I'm your moderator for this evening. And now it is my great pleasure, to introduce our guest this evening. She's a retired CIA intelligence officer with over 25 years of experience. She joined the CIA in 1970, where she specialized in training foreign assets to obtain high-priority intelligence using sub-miniature spy cameras and other espionage technologies. In the CIA, she lived undercover for several decades, working in areas including Moscow, Europe, and the Far East. Just before she retired, she served as the CIA's chief of disguise. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jana Mendez.
Well, thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. I've spent the afternoon out on your waterfront taking some pictures and wishing I lived here. So my first job when I finished speaking tonight is to arrange my next engagement out here. This is a lovely place. I really am. I am smitten. Did you know that on Pier 14 there are quotes from Rudyard Kipling on the bottom rails? There are long quotes of what he had to say about the sea. I photographed them just to take them home and show my friends. This book that we're going to be discussing tonight began during COVID. Everybody had their own way they got through that time period. I started with jigsaw puzzles, morphed into writing rather quickly because I'm not that good at jigsaw puzzles, and discovered that I had to research my own life, because when you walk out of the door of the CIA, you just don't take anything with you. No calendars come out, no memos for the record, nothing comes out of that pit. And you have to go home and you have to, if you're searching for a date, there was a point where I went to the Oval Office and I was remarking on the fact that I never actually wrote that date down, and was trying to figure out, well, it was before this, so Bush was president, but it was after that. Webster was running the CIA, and I just kept triangulating and get it. You know, I got pretty close to when it happened. We'll talk about that when we get there. But let me tell you about being a woman in the CIA. In the operational piece of it, there are women in all parts of CIA, but there are some areas that are more difficult than others. Women excel at running the CIA. You may have noticed this. There's depth in that leadership on our 7th floor, and it continues today. In our analytical sections, the women have always done really, really well. As a matter of fact, it was a group of women working with a man named Michael Scheuer who found bin Laden in Abbottabad, figured out it was him, and he was there. Now, at the time, if you were talking to the men in the operations division, where women didn't have a chance, they would say, oh, Mike and his chicks are trying to track down that terrorist. I think we put that in the book somewhere. It was awful. Science and technology, if you were a woman, if you had a degree in chemistry, physics, engineering, you might have a career. It would be at a lower level than a man, but you would have a career. But in operations, where I wanted to be and where I ended up, the men didn't want women doing that work. They didn't want us feet on the ground overseas. They didn't want us meeting with foreign assets who were betraying their own countries and taking enormous risks to work for America, and who, if they were caught, could easily, well, going to jail would be a no-brainer, but in a lot of countries they would be executed. And if they were in Russia, they'd be executed very, very quickly, and many were. That was the piece of the work that I was part of. I didn't set out to write a book about women, by the way. I set out to write a book about what it's like to work in the CIA. This thing morphed as I wrote it. It became something that I never intended. I'm really happy with where it landed. I'd be so interested to see if you agree. But let me tell you the story of how I got there to begin with. And we have slides. Oh, and I get to see them. I was in Wichita, Kansas. I was in college. I was a junior. And my best friend went to Europe to get married in Germany. And she needed a matron of honor. So I said I would sacrifice and I would go. Went to Germany. This is I'm coming from the land of 3.2 beer, and I'm sitting down with that ceramic-topped great German brew, and I thought I landed in a really good place. with a first lieutenant whose name I can no longer remember, but I remember the taste of the beer. I ended up working. I wanted to stay in Germany. My friend went off on her honeymoon with her husband. They went to Italy. And there I was alone. I was 19, like what to do. So I decided I'd go to Frankfurt on a train, and I did. Found a phone booth in the train station, got a pocket full of Deutschmarks, got a phone book. This is a long time ago. They had the phone books. And I started making phone calls, cold calls, we would call it, to American banks. This was a banking town, and I thought, well, I can find a place there. I made 4 phone calls. I called the American consulate first because, like an idiot, I thought they might hire me. They wouldn't. I called American Express. They said, no, we don't have a job. I called Bank of America. They said, no, we don't have a job. The 4th call was Chase Manhattan Bank. And I said, I'm looking for a job. I said, oh, okay. You speak German? No. You ever worked in a bank? No. Do you have a work permit? Because in Germany, then, you needed a work permit. I said, I do not have a work permit. And they said, why don't you come down and talk to us? I have to tell you, this keeps happening in my career, in my life. That's how I got to Germany from Wichita. That's how I stayed in Germany. And before I invite Melissa in to
You're doing great.
through this. This is John Gazer. He was my first husband. He used to come into the bank every 2 weeks with friends. He was a civilian. He was not in the military. He spoke perfect German. He skied like an angel. He was a champion tennis player. And I married this man a year and a half after I met him. This is in Switzerland, where you get married if you live over there and you're American, because it's the Las Vegas of Europe. The paperwork is minimal, and that's our brand new Volkswagen. We paid $1,500 for that, and we went for a 2-week honeymoon in Switzerland. And he is how I got in the CIA, because while he had told me he was a civilian working for the U.S. military, he lied to me. And he was undercover with the CIA. And when I married him, I had the opportunity to become a contract wife and get married and go inside the CIA and see what the work was.
Now, he didn't tell you he was in the CIA till after he proposed. Isn't that right? You'd already said yes, and he's like, by the way.
That's it. Yeah. He proposed. I said yes. He said, oh, by the way, I work for the CIA. In that order. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the contract wife system that was in place at the time and how much the agency relied on the wives?
The agency relied on the wives enormously. The men were overseas doing the work. The women were just the women were there. A lot of us could type. We could drive cars. We could do contract kinds of things. The first job, I was doing the manifest for an around-the-world flight. It was like DHL, but it was a CIA plane, and you couldn't get on it, or you couldn't put anything on it. But that was jobs like that, low-level jobs, poorly paying jobs. But the women typically wanted to work. So that's how most women back then came in.
But you had a special passion for photography.
I did. I was an avid amateur photographer, and I was in Europe for the first time, and I loved it. The CIA had this huge camera capability, and in Germany, they have great respect for uniforms. If you wear a uniform, you will almost get saluted. It doesn't matter what it is. But in Germany also, if you have a really professional-looking camera, they will open doors for you. If you have a camera on a tripod and you're walking down the street, somebody will stop and tell you what f-stop you want. If you set it up and you've got the black thing and you get underneath it because it's glass plates, they'll wait to see how you're doing. It was a license to enter all kinds of places just because I had it.
And now I just want to stop here for a moment because this book is full of these extraordinary details about, I was working on plane manifests. Did you journal during the time? Or I know I can't remember earlier today. So how you're able to remember so many extraordinary details and stories from this time, any tips?
It's an odd thing. I have a really good memory for some unusual things, like I can remember the formula for some of our secret writing systems. I know how to develop them, but I can't remember what was the day that I went to the Oval Office and met with the President of the United States? That date went up in smoke.
Well, let's go ahead and skip forward then, and let's talk about that day in the Oval Office, because it's a really extraordinary story about why you were there and what happened while you were there. I think there might be something in this in the slideshow a little further. We're going to have to move forward in the slideshow a bit, but I think that that this story. I love this dress.
I was so young that that's my prom dress. I had a German seamstress shorten it. Why did I take my prom dress to Europe? I don't know. But that's a dance contest on the SS United States, and we won.
That is beautiful. This is Wichita, right?
This is back home visiting with my sisters, just temporarily zipping in, introducing them to my husband, climbing in a truck that was called Chicken Fat. That's my dad's truck. And then off we went again. We went overseas to the Far East.
Which one are you? It's hard to tell.
I am facing the camera, kind of in the middle.
Oh, okay.
With
Okay.
dark red, dark pants, yellow shirt.
Excellent.
My sisters.
Which one is Jennifer?
Jennifer's climbing in.
Oh, okay.
There's a bit of Jennifer in my book. Jennifer was my older sister, my charismatic, gorgeous, beautiful, 15 months older than me, older sister, which made me her little sister. And I grew up in her shadow, and it was one of the reasons that I was keen to go find myself somewhere else.
So in many ways, we owe a lot to Jennifer.
We owe a lot to Jennifer. We do. She was something.
Now, one of the things you say here growing up is that because Jennifer was so amazing and charming and everyone loved her, you were a bit of a risk taker. And one of the things that you did that was risky in high school was you helped to stage a walkout, like a political walkout, and nearly didn't graduate. Can you tell us, do you remember what that walkout was for? What were you protesting?
I think it was our local Wichita State University had won the NAACP or something, and they had a walkout. So I was in high school, and I thought, well, we should have a walkout. And I was in art class, and you know who the kids are in art class. They all agreed with me that we should walk out, and we did. And the whole school went. And I remember the doors to the parking lot, and the vice principal stood there and was like, no. And we just walked through him, and we went swimming somewhere. The joke was almost everyone went back but me. And you couldn't make up the work. So if you weren't making really good grades, you might have had a problem graduating that year. But I was making really good grades.
Now, as a wife doing contract work at the time, there were some interesting rules around how high women could go and what happened to your status when you came back stateside in between sort of tours.
When you started looking at the apparatus, at the hiring, at the career potential, at the way HR was managing or not managing your work, you realize that women were just insignificant in this labor pool. They were handy to have if they wanted to do some work. There was no career advancement. If you got promoted while you were working as a contract wife overseas, then when you went back to the States and wanted to be hired, they'd drop you back down to the beginning level. If you were a secretary in Washington, D.C., and you accompanied your husband overseas, they would hire you overseas as a contract wife. So your level would drop back down, and any promotions you got when you went back, they got rid of them. It was a very, very unfair system. But women weren't really complaining back then. Women were happy to have the chance to have a job. We were kind of loving being overseas, and that was the way it was. It was unfair.
You were also expected to be social and have events and charm the ambassadors.
It was like State Department did the same thing. There was a parallel with State Department. You're expected to have dinners. You're expected to go to these diplomatic affairs and chat people up. And if you can get some information out of someone that maybe your husband can't, because he's an official, but you are just a pretty wife in a pretty dress chatting with the ambassador, we could learn a lot of things, and we did. And we, it was about collecting intelligence. So if we could do it, we would do it.
But over time, as you write in the book, you loved the travel. I mean, I'm like, I want to sign up. This life of travel and parties and the kind of family that exists within the CIA sounds really, really amazing. But eventually, as you write about, you sort of got a little restless, got a little bored with the secretarial work, and asked to, was offered the opportunity to take some photography classes.
I was going to leave. I was working for the head of the office I was in, and the office I was in was called Office of Technical Service, and it was the Q of CIA, just like the Q in the James Bond movies. We were the technical support people to the entire intelligence community, but mostly to CIA. Whatever you needed that was technical, we would help you find it. We would buy it. If it didn't exist, and very often what you needed didn't exist, we would invent one. We would build it for you, whether it was a bug to put in an office, whether it was secret writing, whether it was microdot camera, whether it was a concealment device, whether it was a camera that didn't look at all like a camera so that you could do clandestine photography, which is where I was sort of thinking about pointing myself. So being part of that queue was... We were chemists, physicists, engineers, electrical and mechanical, people that were so narrowly trained and specialized in one area that I don't know what they would have done had they not worked for the CIA. Like our battery guy, that's all he did was batteries, batteries, batteries. Eventually, I told Melissa earlier, eventually he was on a team that went up and saved the Hubble telescope. That's where his career took him. But while he was working for us, he was powering all the gadgets that we were giving to James. And by the way, we didn't trust James worth a damn. James had no technical sense. He couldn't remember how things worked. He would lose them. He would break them. He would leave them on the subway. So a lot of the time, we ended up traveling with James. We went with him. We went with the equipment we gave him. If we gave him one of these, he took one of us, because these things were precious, these unique tools we had built, and we wanted to make sure we got them back.
Well, you tell a great story that right after you start this CIA photography school, next thing we jump to, you're in an airplane and you're in a harness, sort of leaning out the side of a very small airplane, taking pictures to demonstrate your ability to take pictures from that far away. And that's just, it says here about a week or so after you join. Here you go.
That's my first photo course. It was called Airborne Platforms. I told my boss, I was the secretary, I said, I think I'm going to go to the Smithsonian. He said, take some of our photo courses instead. So that was the first one, Airborne Platforms. And yeah, in a plane with no doors, they had painted out the tail number so nobody could identify who we were. And we were flying low and kind of crazy. I had a long lens on my 35 millimeter camera. It was 1,000 millimeter lens, trying to resolve the numbers on a license plate on a truck or the train signals on the railroad tracks. Just seeing if I could do that kind of thing. And I could. And so it turned into a career, the beginning of my career, working in photo operations, working with cameras.
I think we have a picture here. There we go.
Well, in this one, we're making concealment devices, and I'm photographing how you get into them. Like it might be a briefcase with a secret compartment, and we give it to whoever, and he had to know how to get in because it was not easy to get in. We put things in things. We had rocks that weren't rocks. I just can't tell you, nothing was what it appeared to be. And they all came with instructions. So that's what this was.
I love that picture. Yeah, there we go. There's one of the pen cameras.
That's a camera. This is kind of a dummy of it. I just wanted you to see that it was like one of those big Mont Blanc pens, the ink pens, big fat status expensive pens that men like to carry. And so we had cameras inside the pens. They also had ink, so they would write. And inside the camera is a film cassette. You know, the Kodak, the little yellow and gold. It wasn't Kodak, but it was a film cartridge. And inside of that was a little piece of film about that long. And when you developed it in the darkroom, there'd be 100 little tiny black dots. Each dot was a page of text, 8.5 by 11. So we'd give that to our assets that were inside the circle. Someone who worked for Putin that could get up to Putin's desk and have a conversation. Someone who could have his be taking notes, talking to Putin, taking notes with his pen. Putin turns his head and talks to somebody else. Our guy just takes his pen, just holds it a little higher, takes a picture of the agenda or the minutes for the meeting. Putin stands up, guy puts his pen in the pocket, he goes to lunch with him. That Tropel pen, which had an 8-piece stack of glass in it for optics, that no one in the world could make that pen except one little man that worked in his garage out here in California. We couldn't find anywhere, any other optical company that could make it. It was collecting solid gold. The best intelligence we had during the Cold War came out of that pen.
And so one of your jobs was to teach people how to use that, right? And to help them develop the film once it was done.
The developing was like heart-stopping because you always knew that whoever had taken the pictures had taken a huge risk. And you just always had to respect that. And, you made sure. We were talking about rehearsing and dry runs of things that are important. You want to have done them before so you know exactly what's going to happen. Developing that film was like that.
Well, and you could lose it if the chemicals are wrong or if they get exposed too early. And you tell a couple of really, sort of stressful stories to read about trying to develop it in the dark without being able to really see what you're doing.
While the embassy was being attacked.
So
and vacated, and the whole embassy is emptied, and there's a Marine Guard somewhere, and they have forgotten, because I'm a visitor, that I'm in the dark room developing film, and I cannot stop in the middle of the process. You can't put it on hold. Anyway, that was a moment.
And there are several stories like that in the book, and they're really amazing. But you didn't stay in the photography business, entirely. You then moved into disguise, and imagine how thrilling it is to open the table of contents of this book, and then there's disguise school. Yes, please. I would love to read that part. So yeah, can you talk about how you moved from photography to the disguise business?
I had a lot of training. They train at CIA. They just train you to death, and it's a good thing because you want to be able, no matter kind of what you encounter, you want to have some baseline of I should probably do this if that happens, because you never really know. But the disguise thing happened because I'd finished a big training course. I'd learned to do the broad range of everything we did in this queue. I could do a bug. I could do electronic encrypted communications. I could build a concealment device. I could do all this stuff. So they sent me to the subcontinent, and I spent a summer filling in for someone there, and fell in love with the place. Everything about it. The music, the food, the climate. There was nothing I didn't like. And I came back to Langley, and I said I'd like an assignment there. And my career management officer at the time was Tony Mendez. And he said, there isn't a photo job for you coming up for 3 years. He said, the only thing that's going to open up is disguise. It'll be a year and a half, 2 years. I said, so make me a disguise officer. How hard could it be? It was hard. And so I took a huge right turn in the middle of my career, which most career management officers would tell you is probably not a good idea. But I wanted to go out there, and that's what I did. That's what we did, and spent a couple of years in that part of the world. 2 of the best years of my life. It was a wonderful decision.
Well, and throughout all of this, you're going on these trips and engaging in these operations, and your husband, of course, is still also CIA, going and doing his own operations. But you guys weren't even allowed to talk to each other about what you were doing for years, which my husband is amazed because I bore him every day with the mundane details of my job. And he would like to know how to do this.
Tell him we'll have a drink, we'll talk later. My husband was in security, which is quite different from what I was doing. And for a while, he was doing polygraphs. So we didn't talk about our work. I knew nothing about polygraphs. He knew nothing about disguise. We were not really interested in each other's work. But he would come home on occasion. And once he said, I didn't know where he'd been, and he didn't tell me. But he said while he was doing the polygraph, the room he was in, there was a curtain rod across the window, and there was a snake, a live snake, wrapped around the curtain rod. Well, that My husband was scared to death of snakes. It was one of his things. And it really put him off, and he wondered if that guy had done that for that reason. Another time, there was a gun on the table. So he would tell me that stuff, but that wasn't classified. I would know where he had been if he brought home a wheel of Parmesan cheese or a tray of baklava. Whatever he was bringing, it was always something to eat or drink. We could maybe guess, but.
And you even had a guest book that
we did.
That's how you kept, this is, pre-internet,
Inside the door. There was a mirror and there was a shelf and there was like a guest book, looked like a wedding book. And he'd say, I'm leaving Tuesday, I'll be back Thursday. We're supposed to have dinner with somebody on the weekend if we're here. And then I'd write a note and he'd write a note. And that book was fun to read later because it looked like two psychos. It didn't look like a marriage.
What was it like being married to someone who's a polygraph expert? That seems really interesting and intimidating at this point.
At the time, my youngest sister came to live with us. She was 17 years younger than me. She came to live with us in Europe, and she kind of came into her own. She was a teenager in Europe, and she'd go out with her friends, and she'd come home at 1 a.m, and my first husband would meet her and say, "Where you been?" And, she'd do that thing like, I was just out with friends. We were just having fun. He'd just kind of nail her to the wall. She had this huge blush that she would get. She could never understand how he could do that, how he could make her blush like that. She never knew that he was a polygraph operator.
I picture him like sitting at the kitchen table with the light, above his head.
It was not fair. It was not fair.
And it does seem though but I know eventually you guys did split up, but he seems pretty supportive throughout the book of the things that you were doing.
Oh, he was a great guy. He was just the wrong husband. There was nothing really wrong with him. He was supportive. And when I ran into some problems, he was very supportive, telling me how to deal with conflict. My mother's point of view was you avoid conflict at all costs. You never end up yelling at dinner. You never end up having an unpleasant moment like that with people. You just don't. You kind of fold. That was my job, was to fold. And then I ran into this boss of mine out in the subcontinent and forgot how to fold.
Tom Smallwood. Who plays him in the movie or the Prestige TV? What is the 8-part series on Netflix? Who's Tom? I looked for pictures of him. I couldn't find.
Oh, you won't.
CIA.
When the CIA got the first version of the book, they review the books extensively, sometimes more than once. The lawyers from CIA called me and they said, "This Smallwood, is he still alive?" I said, "No." They said, "Good." Because they were thinking, because he'll probably want to sue you. That's what they were thinking. He was a terrible boss.
So you spend some time in the subcontinent. You deal with this terrible boss, and your husband gave you some advice on how to manage that.
Well, the polygraph operator had some ideas when my boss just didn't like me. And I'd always thought, I get along great with men, with guys. I work with guys. It's all guys but me. Of course I get along with them. And when I knew I was going to be working for Smallwood, Tony Mendez, my career management officer, said, that could be problematic. He is not going to be good to work with. I got out there, and Smallwood just didn't want me as an employee. He wanted to send me home. I'm on the other side of the world with him, and he thought he'd like to send me home and have me replaced by one of his friends, some guy. And I wasn't about to go home. And so he came back from Washington, D.C., and he said, "Yeah, I talked to your boss's boss." He said, we're gonna do this thing. So I went in the next morning with advice from my polygraph husband. I took a pad of paper and a pen, pulled up a chair, right to his desk. I said, "Tell me again, say it again. I want to make sure I got this right. You're going to send me home short of tour, and the only reason you would do that, the only way you could do that is for some kind of cause." And there was no cause. I said, "I just want to make sure I have it right. Say it again, Tommy, so I can write it down." And he wouldn't say it again. As a matter of fact, he had a coffee cup full of Cointreau while he was sitting at his desk that morning. And I just wanted to talk to him before he drank too much Cointreau. I did not get sent home short of tour. I had a great assignment. It was the beginning. It launched me into the next level at CIA. But this was one of those guys that just, you can't even explain it.
When you write about disguise, there's some really interesting, there's everything in here is interesting. But you say disguise is an additive process. You can make a person taller, but not shorter, fatter, but not slimmer, older, but usually not younger. And then you talk about an incident where you actually disguised a man, but his real disguise was to take all that off. You sort of sent him in with the wig on, and that when he wanted to leave and go do spy things, he took the wig off. Yeah. And so this idea of sort of normalcy as the disguise, which I don't know why more movies don't use this. I think that was such an interesting idea. But you do write. I mean, you don't write about a lot of specifics, but this is a specific instance where you were able to sort of use his not disguised persona as the way to cover.
First of all, the people I was working with in disguise, I was working with men. I wasn't disguising women because there weren't any women to disguise because the men wouldn't let them work in that part of the CIA. So I'm disguising men. I don't know if the women in this audience can imagine walking up to your husband, your friend, your brother, your whoever, and saying, "Here, put on this wig," because it's not a good beginning. They don't want to wear wigs. They don't want to glue on a mustache. They don't want to do any of that. It's almost visceral. They don't want to do it. Plus, they don't think they should need to do it. Most men think they have big, strong hearts, and they're just going to muscle through whatever it is, and they don't need a disguise. That's where you begin. So you're always kind of fiddling with this idea. There came a time at CIA when the threats that we were looking at changed. It turned into terrorism and drugs, narcotics. And once those became our targets, our men started getting scared, physically scared, because the guys that we're working against now have guns, and a lot of them are criminals, or they're fervent religious nuts, and they will hurt you, they will shoot you, they will kill you. So our disguises became more like body armor. They would protect you. And that's a different proposal to a man here. This will keep you from getting hurt, and you can go home to your family in the evening, and they're not going to follow you home because they won't know who it is, just on and on and on. So we started getting the men in disguise. The one you were talking about, he walked into my office. We love to see a bald man come through the door. That's the exception to everything I just told you. That bald guy was like itching to see what he was going to look like. The one we're talking about is a really nice-looking guy, worked out. He had on jeans and cowboy boots. I thought, this is a dude. And so what we did for him, he was totally bald. We made him an exquisite toupee. He had just a little fringe around here. It was human hair. It was exactly modeled to his head. I made a wig pattern. We sent it overseas. It was the best thing that we could do. You couldn't buy something like that. He looked really good in it, which meant that he liked to wear it, which meant that he said, okay, it's his idea. I'm going to wear this every day. The only time they're going to see me bald is when I'm in disguise. Think about it. It's brilliant. And that's what he did. And he took it, he was the model person you wanted. He said, I have some clothes, shirts my aunt sent me, things I would never wear. I'm going to put them together. That's my costume. He said, I'm going to wear like a gold necklace for men. I'm going to wear too much cologne. I'm going to wear some glasses that are kind of tinted and look sort of European. And he said, and I'm going to take off my wedding ring, so that you have that white band where your wedding ring should be. And I said, every woman in the room is just going to start stepping back from you when you enter. And he said, that's fine. But he made a character, and that's what we suggested to a lot of people. Let's see how you walk. Let's see how you carry yourself. We have to change everything. It's not just your face. he was memorable. You can tell because I will always remember him.
And how do you know how to train them in terms of walking and carrying themselves and thinking of a new character? And were there sort of drama classes that you would give them, or how did you?
You want to change a walk, you give them something that will change their walk because they can't remember to do it. So you put one pebble, just a pebble in a shoe. An uncomfortable you put 3 there, the foot will start bleeding. So just one pebble, and they'll walk different. Something to do with their hands. Could be like worry beads. It could be something to fiddle with, unless that's what they do. And then you try and figure out how to calm their hands down. You have them walk up and down the hall, and you check them out and put it all together. And then when you think you've got the final disguise, and they say, "Okay, I'm good. I can wear this. I will wear this." They're like swearing to you that they're going to use it. I will use it if I need it. Then you say, okay, great. Go to the cafeteria here at CIA, where there must be 5,000 people in there, and 3,000 of them. Just go have lunch and come back. Tell us how it worked. And they always came back and said, oh my God, my boss was 2 tables away, and the guys I work with, they kept walking by getting, I don't know. No one knew. No one saw me. No one paid any attention. Then you knew that if they needed it, they might wear it. But without that, they might not.
It's so crazy to me that they wouldn't let women be spies, because we wear disguises every day.
Since we were kids, we know this
I was
stuff.
12 when I got makeup.
That's right. That's right. The thing with women, though, the problem with women, and at the very end, there were a couple, they wanted to look good. Mm. They didn't want to just look different. They wanted to look good and different. we couldn't always guarantee that. What else we got? Oh, this is part of the what you see is not what you get. This is a one-time pad for encrypted communications, but we had to put it somewhere so the person could take it home and have it lying around. So we put it in a walnut. I used to worry about that walnut.
Is this from the museum?
That's in the museum. That walnut lives in a museum.
I think I remember this. I've been to the museum. I saw this one in the Rat, I think it's on. Yeah, there we go.
In Moscow, it was so dangerous to meet with one of the people that was with a Russian who was working with us, that we did impersonal communication. We never met face to face with those Russians. And we would dead drop stuff to them. And a rat was a great dead drop because nobody's going to touch a rat except for the person that's looking for it. And inside the rat, we might have microdots. We might have medicine for his kids. We might have questions. We could have all kinds of, we have money. You can get a lot in a rat. and then we closed them up. This one's not finished. This is an unfinished rat. And then we dipped them in Tabasco. And then we dropped them by a drain pipe or something. So the person that was looking for the rat knew where the rat was going to be. And
there's money in there. There's like a jump drive in there.
You could get a lot in there. You could get emeralds. Bob Hansen, who spied for the Russians, they put emeralds in his dead drops so that money wouldn't compromise him.
And was it Tabasco to keep the animals from?
Yeah, because the only thing that'll pick up a wild animal might pick up a dead rat. But if it's covered with Tabasco, they'll drop it and run off howling. Where are we here?
Yeah, here we go.
Oh, this is a nice pause. This is just between doing one thing and doing another. I think I stopped at a bar. Sorry.
I love that jacket. That is a very moment jacket.
Yeah.
And this guy in the background, just no idea.
Yep.
All right. So Tony Mendez was someone you knew professionally for almost your whole career.
I always kind of knew he was there. I never knew about Argo when he did the Argo operation. I did not know about that for years and years and years. I had no need to know, although I worked in the same office. And I worked for the director of the office at that time. And Tony was always moving up, so he was career management at one point. When I was working in photography, he was part of that, but at an upper level. When I was in disguise, he got me the disguise job. He was always kind of around, but I was never paying any attention to him. When I married him 100 years later, I told him if I had known I was going to marry him someday, I would have been so much nicer. If you want to do a pivot and talk about magic at all, this is a moment that magic can come into this conversation or not, because we were interested in magic. We were interested in deception and illusion, and we were interested with working with the magicians out here in California who made their living creating impossible things.
So how did that play in? Was it more like a sort of distraction on the one hand so that you could do something on the other? Or what part of magic were you looking to incorporate?
The fact that a lot of what we were doing it wasn't magic, it was deception and illusion. We had surveillance, we had people watching us, and we didn't want them to see what we were doing. So if we could create a way to do something that was invisible, we could, this is just eye candy, at a magician's
That's so cool.
studio. I was in Peshawar. We were concerned when the Russians were there that one of them was going to try and defect to the American embassy. And that would have been pretty straightforward. He could have come in, it would have been a he, could have come into our embassy and said, help, save me, I want to defect. And the problem then would be, how would we get him out of the embassy and out of the country and across the border? And we were always thinking three levels ahead. What if this happens? What would we do? How would we respond? So we went to Peshawar to try and figure out what we would do if that happened. And what we did then is we went to Hollywood and we talked to the magicians. Not the magicians, I'm sorry, the magic builders. And they said, well, you must have all these dollies lying around in your embassies, like they're everywhere in the whole world. A dolly to move things, boxes of things. They built 3 crates of water to put on our dolly that are not 3 crates of water. They just look like 3 crates of water. It's a concealment device for a human being. And we had that positioned at our embassy in Peshawar. If anybody came in, we were going to get them in the crates, wheel them out to, I don't know, some delivery van, put them in the van, take them somewhere to some smuggler's truck, and have the smuggler cross the border where he's paying bakshish to everybody the whole way and get the Russian out. I don't know that we ever used it there, but we had it there in case we ever needed it.
And who would ever suspect water, right? I mean,
that's the magic of the magicians. It's how do you fool their eyes? How do you fool their vision? They're looking straight at what's going on, and they have to believe that they're seeing this when in fact actually they're seeing that. It's a real skill.
And it's almost so outrageous that it's like, of course they would never. You know what I mean? Like there are things that look suspicious and things that are so over the top that you go, oh, that's probably real. This might be one of them.
From reading the book that we talk a lot about masks and full-face masks. And that whole idea of masks, of making twins came out of the magic community. That you could have 2 people that looked exactly alike. And then you can do a lot of deceptions and illusions. Sometimes you need 2 of you, not just one of you. Like David Copperfield walking through the Great Wall of China. It was an act he used to do on the stage. I suspect, without knowing it for a fact, that there were 2 David Copperfields on the stage that night. That's how you pull that off, maybe. David, I'm sorry. They had very useful information for us, and we used it a lot. We did.
Somebody from the audience asks, do you have a favorite spy TV show or movie?
I liked The Americans a lot. I don't watch a lot of TV, and I missed, I think, some very, very good things. I tried watching Homeland. I couldn't watch it. I'm sorry. I couldn't watch her. I couldn't watch this crazy, was it Carrie? Was that her name? Mm-hmm. I thought, she wouldn't have lasted a week. We would have fired her so fast. And then I watched The Americans, and Carrie Russell, they just kept giving her another wig, brown hair, and the next week red hair. And she's always beautiful. She always looked the same, except she had fabulous hair. But her husband, and see, I don't even remember the names of the actors. Did you know they were married? I didn't know that either. But the husband would put on this mousy little crummy wig, and he'd pull it down, and these terrible glasses, and he just looked exactly right. He looked like a guy, if he got on the elevator you were on and went up 2 floors with you and got off, you would never remember that he had been on the elevator. This was a design goal that we wanted to do with a lot of our people, make them forgettable. The Americans, they did that piece of the disguise work really well. And then the whole family situation with the kids and the FBI guy that lived next door, it was rich. It was wonderful.
Well, one of the first videos that I saw that you did was a video you did for Wired, where you critiqued some television spies. And one of the things that you critiqued was they showed you a clip of Atomic Blonde, the Charlize Theron movie, and you said, and I remember it was so interesting. You said you would never have a spy that's that striking, right? You want somebody, you would want a woman or a man who is this gray man, I think is what you call it, who's somebody who's really forgettable. So that when you see people like this who are just, like the Red Sparrow, Jennifer Lawrence Red Sparrow, or, Atomic Blonde, that they're way too noticeable.
I sat on a stage next to Jennifer Lawrence after Red Sparrow because I worked with the author. He was the chief of station. And she was so beautiful. I have to tell you, we were like this. And I was like dumbstruck. She was it was a terrible movie, but she was really pretty. It was a wonderful book. I thought it was a terrible movie. She was gorgeous. That's it. That's my review.
So you and Tony Mendez fell in love, and you actually, first you split with your first husband. That happened first, to be clear. Then you and Tony Mendez got together, and in San Francisco around the time you came here.
I'm revisiting all our little special places while I'm out here talking to you guys. I'm having a really good trip.
And then shortly you had had children prior, but found yourself in your late 40s pregnant.
If you ever want to see a speechless community of CIA people, you had to be there the day that at 47 I told them that I was pregnant and that I was thinking about retiring because the CIA actually had this window that was getting ready to open. I had never, ever thought about retiring. They were going to drag me out of there with my stilettos, leaving stripes on the tarmac. I wasn't going to go quietly. And then I got pregnant and had this child who, that changed my life again.
Now, the child of Tony Mendez and Jana Mendez sounds like a super agent, right? Sounds like...
No, he's a musician.
But you guys are both really artistic too. I mean, between your photography and Tony was a painter, right? So I have this picture of you and he together in this place that y'all had. That's a sort of a rural location. He's painting, you're taking pictures, and then like George Clooney knocks on the door.
There's another adult son who is a sculptor, and he's just having a huge career. Tony was a serious painter his whole life. I started selling my photographs. We did have a big art studio, and we did that for 20, 25 years.
And then suddenly...
And then George Clooney called us.
Yeah.
in the middle of the night. And that's when the Argo thing started happening. And we lived outside of D.C. on 40 acres, right where the Blue Ridge Mountains just start going up. It's beautiful. And had the art studio. Tony had been out there for years before I joined him there. And all the neighbors, I mean, he knew everyone, and they all knew him as a guy who, out there in the country, they'd say, "Where do you work?" And he'd say, "I go down the road." That's the country answer. I go down the road. That means I go into Washington, D.C., and you don't want to hear any more about that, do you? And they don't. There was no more conversation. What about Tony Mendez? Oh, he goes down the road. So when they all discovered that he was a CIA, not just a CIA, but a decorated, bemedaled, bejeweled CIA officer, they were dumbfounded. It was amazing.
And next thing you know, you're at the Oscars. You're shopping for a dress to wear to award ceremony.
They made that. They made the movie. Initially, it was Clooney going to do it, and so we recruited the screenwriter. His name was Chris. It was his first script, and we said he was our penetration agent. Of the movie. So he'd call us and tell us what was going on. Then George got stuck in another movie, and Ben Affleck came muscling in and took it. And we said, "So Chris, what's he doing with the script?" Chris said, "I can't tell you." He said, "I can't tell you." So we didn't have a lot to do with the script. Chris knew the story very, very well. We made sure of that. But we were surprised when we saw the movie. And we loved the movie. We thought it was a really good movie. And by the way, so did the CIA. They've never, ever had another movie good about them.
So
ever.
The recruitment went way.
I think it had to help.
And you write about how one of Tony's favorite moments in the movie is one that was it was invented. It sort of was true to the moment, but also was an embellishment there at the end. The runway scene at the end.
Yeah, people want to know how did the movie veer away from the true story, and it basically told the true story. It omitted some things. Tony was never separated from his first wife. Tony had 3 children, not 1 child. Those other 2 kids are still ticked off about that because it was their opportunity of a lifetime to be on screen. And then, of course, the end where the Iranians are chasing the airplane down the runway, an airplane that is moving really fast. It was crazy. The screenwriter said, you gotta hear me out. He said, I wanted the audience to get as scared and worried as Tony was on the plane. So that was the intent. I think that was a flaw in the movie because people say, well, that wasn't true. So what else wasn't true? The story was, the story was true to what happened. And we still see those, I still see those people. They're still all around.
And the Canadians, though, weren't happy that you had taken back the thunder that they had been enjoying.
The Canadians thought that they didn't get enough credit. But when they made the movie, when George Clooney said, we're going to make a movie of that story, Tony came out the next morning and said, well, we got to write the book. Because they will change things. And this is a historic, this should be documented properly. This is a story that really happened and all the nuances, so we'll write a book. And we did write a book that very few people read because they all saw the movie. But all of the details are in the book, and it was a moment.
Well, now you put it up. This was the picture we were talking about earlier. This is the Oval Office meeting. I'm just going to Vanna White here for just a moment. Please understand what is happening. What she is holding right here in her hand is a head. So can you explain, and this is, of course, then President George H.W. Bush, explain what has happened here?
I will woman-splain this, this picture to you. When I was chief of disguise, we developed a full-faced animated mask. That means a mask that I could be wearing right now and giving you this talk, and you would not know that I had on a mask. This is a big deal. It's really hard. It took us a long time to get there. Hollywood never got there. They went straight to CGI, and they can do it too, but they do it, fiddling with the digital piece of it. So I started out as an African-American man at CIA, and I showed Bill Webster, the head of CIA. He's sitting in the dark suit on the left side. I showed him this new product, and he said, Jiminy, we got to take this to the White House. It was never meant to go to the White House. But we went, and in the room, John Sununu has his back to the camera. Bob Gates has his back to the camera. Brent Scowcroft over there on the far left side. Of course, it's the president. And there is a photographer in the room, obviously, because there's a photograph. So I'm briefing the president. I said, I'm here to show you the best thing we've got right now, the latest, greatest thing. I showed him some pictures of himself in disguise because he had been the head of the CIA. I said, I remember we did these things. Do you remember that? And he's laughing like, oh, that was so funny. Yeah, I really like that. And then I said, so I'll show you what I'm wearing. And he said, don't take it off, whatever it is. And he got up and he walked over and he's walking around me and he's looking for an edge, but he couldn't see one. Of course he couldn't see one. So he sat down, he said, okay, do it. So I do this Tom Cruise peel. They should rename it. I was way ahead. I took it off and I'm holding it up in the air to show him that it's nothing. It's like a feather. The hair is attached. It's all one piece. When you put this thing on in the dark in a car and you get the eyes feeling clicked in, you're good. It looks perfect. So he liked it a lot, and he was kind of oohing and awing, and the photographer took a few pictures. So I was the first one to brief that day. I was the first one to leave. Tony had said, be sure you know the door you come in. Check it out when you come in. There's 2 other doors, and they don't go out. One is a broom closet. You don't want, one of our people ended up in the broom closet. And Tony said, we don't want 2 of those, so just know. So I did. I went to the outer office. the photographer came out after me. I'm playing with some puppies on the floor, Millie's puppies. And the photographer said, "What was that?" I said, You photographed it, right? She said, "But what was it?" It wasn't digital. She couldn't look at it on her screen and go, "Oh, that's cool." She said, "What was that?" I said, I can't tell you. It's classified. I can't talk about it.
I love this moment. This is amazing. And Dan Quayle missed it. And
Dan Quayle missed it entirely. If you ever wondered if he was as bad as they made him out to be, he came tiptoeing in after this with his portfolio, and he's like looking sheepish, and he missed the whole thing. Anyway, it took the photographer 10 years to send me the picture, so I think I ticked her off. And the first picture I got, they had airbrushed the mask out of it. So I have a picture in my wall of fame in my little office back home of me in that picture with my hand in the air. They left my finger, and there's no mask. It looks like, and furthermore, sir, they need more troops. I don't know. And people, my friends, my people would say, "What were you saying to him?" And I would say, "It's classified. I can't talk about it." That's my moment. That's my moment.
we have a question here from the audience who wants to know, what is the best piece of professional advice that you've received, and who was it from?
Oh, my God. That stops me cold. I think we always used to kind of joke around about Baden-Powell and his Boy Scouts and their motto, which was, "Be prepared, be prepared." And it became an unspoken motto where I was: be prepared, be ready. We were talking about it in the green room, about dry runs, about testing things out, about never going in cold, about having a good idea what you were going to do before it even happened. But what if this, or what if that? Be prepared, think it through. That was kind of a mantra that we shared, and it doesn't sound like much, but it was really important. When you're walking down an alley in Latin America where drugs are such a problem, and there's so much money, and there's so much violence, everybody is armed. And this night, this crowd of guys, they're drunk and they're armed in an alley, and you come around a corner in high heels, and you're not a Latina, you are a gringo from up north, and you're walking at them, and you go, "Oh, damn." I can't turn around and walk back. I know what I have to do, because why? Because I'm prepared. I have to walk through them. And it was one of the scariest things I ever did. And then after you're through them, you have to keep walking. You can't peek to see if...
You have to get to your hotel room.
Yeah, really. I was buying cigarettes. That's what I was doing. It was a message from God to stop smoking.
Well, one of the things that really comes through in the book is that the job that you do, of course, is really, you have to be really diligent. You have to be very detail oriented. You really have to do everything right. And something that's really lovely about the book is how much you respect the field agents, and how, you know everything that you do is preparing them for their very, very difficult job, and that is the thing, and caring about what they do and making, wanting to make sure that they're okay and as prepared as they can be, is why you, in part at least, were so great at what you did, and really, took every precaution to make sure that they got what they needed. And that's such a lovely place to come from, because you think, like, how do you operate under such pressure and make sure you are prepared at every point, and the love you have for your fellow either CIA members or people that they recruited is really comes through in the book. It's not just stories.
It was a team thing. At CIA, we kind of felt like we were family. Even when you were the person overseas, you still had the sense of being on a team. We didn't talk about teams back then. Now everybody's on a team. I mean, that's just that's the nomenclature that we use. We didn't really use it. I used to think when I was doing what I was doing, kind of at the end of the string, the subcontinent, I used to think it was like running one of those races, and now I had the baton. But the baton had been handed to me and to someone before them, and then it was this progression of getting that piece of work done. I always liked that idea. And then when I was back home, somebody else is out there carrying it, and you can, you have this continuity that worked really well.
Well, one of the things about this book is the timing. It is, of course, International Women's Month, and we have a question from the audience. Somebody says, what is some advice you'd give to the young women of today, especially those working in tech? We're here in the Bay Area, which is still a very male-dominated field.
Well, I think working in tech is one of the best things that women can do, because they can do the work. They traditionally have not done that work, but they're filling up all those empty slots. My mom worked in computers when I was coming up. She was the only mom that among my friends, the only mom that worked, and she got no respect at all from the men that she worked with. But I know just in the last couple of years, talking to women inside the CIA, inside the International Spy Museum, or wherever I go, women are mixing it up with the men, and the technical side of it doesn't seem to be slowing anybody down. Not really. Women are as capable as men are. And they seem much more interested in pursuing that today. It's becoming part of our everyday life. I'm a leftover. I am technically not where I should be, and it's an issue. If you can't keep up with that today, if you're in my generation and you can't keep up with it, you better have somebody around you working with you. This is my younger sister who's doing this for me, making sure that my Google calendar is straight, making sure that, I'm doing all those things I have to do.
Well, actually, that leads another question, which is because of course you still know people in the CIA, you still have friends there. Yeah. How has the iPhone and social media changed the playing field in terms of espionage?
It will have changed it enormously. And I can't really know how. I'd like to. I would actually kill if I could get some questions answered, but I don't have a need to know, so I'm not going to know. I've been talking to some fairly high-level CIA people recently. Mike Morrell just did a podcast, and he was a former deputy director of CIA, and he was kind of giving me maybe a peek behind the scenes. A lot of the technology that we think is going to shut down our operational modus operandi might have actually the opposite effect. It might give us a new way to look at what we do and how to look at it and how to use that same technology in a different way. There are very, very clever people sitting in buildings around the world trying to figure out how can you make this work for you, this thing that looks like it's going to kill your operation. What if you could somehow turn it in a way that it enhanced your operation? I think that kind of thinking is what's going to move everybody forward. The thing is that everybody's going to be thinking those same thoughts. So you will always be trying to stay ahead of your opposition. We've got so many great minds on this kind of work that I have to believe that you can't shut down operations. You have to continue collecting intelligence. I mean, the job of the CIA is to discern the plans and intentions of our enemies. That's it. What are they going to do? What is Putin getting ready to do tomorrow? What is all of them? What are the Koreans going to do? What are the Chinese up to? What do we have to prepare for as a country? We need to know what their intention is. You cannot do that sitting in an armchair somewhere. You're going to have to cross foreign borders. You're going to have to go after what we call human intelligence, technical intelligence certainly as well. But it's a person-to-person thing. You need people who are inside of their governments to talk to us about what our policymakers need to know. So this cat and mouse thing will continue going on. But once it starts morphing into ChatGPT and AI, I don't know. I get lost what it's going to become and how it. I had coffee with someone before we talked this evening, and the question was, what's real anymore? You look at text, is that real? You look at thoughts and ideas, is that real? You look at voices, is that actually a real voice? And the question was, what if you're dealing with a person that isn't real, not a person at all? This is absolutely possible. I think it's just scary as hell.
Well, you were at the CIA during the Watergate scandal, of course, and so at that point you had, my understanding is, a lot of questioning of institutions, some people losing faith in institutions around this time, and seems like we're sort of in another moment of that, where we've got some people talking about deep state and, other people making accusations. What is the morale like among the folks that you still know who are at the CIA? I mean, they're putting themselves in harm's way every day, and there seems to not be a high level of appreciation for them at the moment.
The CIA's never had a high level of appreciation, or at least not high enough, according to us. I mean, when you're working behind a black curtain, just like the magicians are, and people can't see what you're doing and can't understand how you're making the connections, it doesn't inspire trust, maybe, in a way. But we all have to do the same thing. We have to discern where the truth is. Where is the truth and what is the truth? And that's where the analytical piece of CIA has always played such a huge role. They get all source information, which is public information, classified information from every point of view they can, put it together, see what they've got. But I would point out that the CIA has always been divided into four pieces. There was admin, there was operational, there was science and technology, and there was, there's one more. I don't want to go back and do it. They've added a fifth, and it's cyber. It's a whole new fifth
Space
piece.
Force.
It's not Space Force. It's looking at the cyber world, and it's the fifth piece of CIA. We've stood up a cyber element, big cyber element inside of CIA, clearly to look at some of these questions and some of these problems and figure out what to do about it.
Well, we want to make sure we end in time so folks can get their books signed.
Oh, yes.
By you. So let's, the timer there tells me we have to wrap it up. So everyone, before I give final announcements, let us all thank Mrs. Mendez, author of In True Face.
If anyone by mistake ends up with my copy of the book that has my onward schedule in it, just bring it over to me on your way out of the door, please, because without this, I'm going to be stuck here for another week.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
All right. We encourage you to pick up a copy of the new book at your local bookstore. If you want to support the club's efforts in making virtual and in-person programming possible, please visit our website at www.commonwealth.org. I'm Melissa Kane. Thank you. Take care. Grab a book on the way out. Thank you.
Thanks.